The winter of 1814 had already begun its slow work of undoing Ravensmore House when the great ballroom filled. On the night the Duke was at last to choose a bride, with more silk and more candlelight than the crumbling old stones had held in a decade. And into that gold-lit room passed every jeweled heiress presented for his choosing. The Duke of Ravensmore walked the whole length of the marble floor, stopped before the plain dressmaker standing in the servant's shadow at the edge of it, and said, in a voice pitched for the entire ton to hear, "I have already chosen. It is her." The music did not so much stop as forget itself. 100 faces turned as one, and 100 fans went still, and the woman in the dove gray gown at the wall, the woman who had cut and stitched every glittering dress in that room and was meant to be invisible inside it, looked up at him with a needle still threaded at her wrist. "Your Grace," said Iris Holloway, when she found her voice, "you have mistaken your place in the room." "I have not," he answered. "I have crossed it." "Then cross it back. There are 40 women here who spent a year preparing to hear that sentence. I am the one who hemmed them. I am aware of what you are. I am telling you what I have decided you are to be." He stood close enough that she had to tip her chin to meet him, and no closer. His gaze rested on her a fraction too long for a duke and a dressmaker, and something moved behind the storm gray of his eyes that the whole assembled ton could see and could not name. Iris could not name it either. She only knew that her pulse had gone loud in her own ears, and that she had one pin loose in her cuff, and that if she fixed her attention on it, she would not have to look at him. She fixed her attention on it to understand how a seamstress came to be standing in a duke's ballroom on the night he was to choose his duchess. One must go back a little, to the autumn and to the fittings. Iris Holloway had come to Ravensmore House in the wet end of September, in a hired trap with 3 trunks of muslin and 1 of good silk, because the dowager who ran the season on her nephew's behalf, since he himself would not require that every candidate for his hand be dressed by a single needle, so that no advantage of gown might tip the choosing. Iris was that needle. She was 27, which the dowager called old for the trade, and Iris called experienced. She wore gray because a seamstress who wears color competes with her ladies, and she had learned long ago that a woman who means to be paid does not compete with the women who pay her. Her father had been a mercer in a small way in Cheapside, dead these 5 years, and his daughter had inherited his eye for cloth, his ledgers kept to the farthing, and rather more of his debts than his stock. She measured her circumstances as her father had taught her to measure everything, in plain subtractions. The house that received her was the coldest she had ever worked in, and not for want of coal. There was money enough to burn. What the place lacked was any reason to. The master did not entertain. He did not, so far as the servants could tell her, do anything at all but walk the long gallery after dark and sit in a library no one else was permitted, and refuse, one after another, with a courtesy that never warmed, every young woman his aunt paraded before him. He had refused, that autumn, a marquis's daughter, 2 earls' daughters, a Prussian heiress, and a beauty out of Bath, so celebrated the newspapers had printed her profile. The season called him the coldest bachelor in England, and printed that too. Iris met him on her 4th day, and by accident. She had come out into the gallery with her mouth full of pins, hunting better light, and had walked directly into a tall man in a plain dark coat standing before a portrait with his hands behind his back. She spat the pins into her palm before she spoke, which was the first thing about her that he would tell her. A year later, he had loved. "I beg your pardon," said Iris. "I was chasing the window." "Chase it. It is better company than the portrait." She glanced at it, a hard-faced old man in a hunting coat. "Your father?" "My grandfather. He hangs there to remind the house what it costs to be a Ravensmore, in case the house should forget. And what does it cost? Everything, he said. And it is always paid by someone who did not choose to spend it. Then you keep poor accounts, sir, for a house so grand. My father would have said a debt paid by the wrong person is a debt still owing. Then he turned, and she saw the storm gray eyes, and understood from how the footman at the end of the gallery had frozen into furniture exactly whom she had been lecturing with pins in her mouth. Your Grace, she said, and dropped the curtsy a beat late. I did not know you. No, you did not. Something in the plainness of the words made them almost a thanks. Go and catch your window, Miss Holloway. I am the seamstress. I know what you are, he said. I had not known you owned a tongue, and he inclined his head and went on down the gallery, and Iris stood in the failing light with the pins biting her palm and the strangest sensation that she had passed some examination she had not sat. She would not learn for a long while what the examination had been, but the viewer may know it now, and hold it, as the whole long story is held up by it like a house upon a hidden beam. The Duke did not walk his gallery after dark for melancholy. He walked it because he was listening, in his own cold house, for one honest voice among the many that wanted him, and with pins and impertinence. That September evening he had begun to find it. He had turned away a Marquis's daughter and a Prussian heiress and a beauty out of Bath, not from a frozen heart, but because none of them had ever once spoken to him as a man rather than a fortune with a title stitched to it. Iris did not know this. Iris thought she had merely been rude to a duke and escaped a scolding. That gap between what he had already silently decided and what she did not dare to guess is the whole engine of the winter, and it will not close until the last act. The fittings began in earnest the next week, and it was there the trouble started, though it did not look like trouble. It looked like a duke who had suddenly acquired opinions about muslin. He came to the first of them uninvited, and stood by the window while Iris pinned Lady Cassandra Pruitt into 80 guineas of French silk. Lady Cassandra was the dowager's favorite for the match of Viscount's daughter, gold-haired, sharp as a milliner's shears and twice as cold. His Grace approves the color, I think, she said, to the mirror, meaning Iris to hear it. His Grace, came the answer from the window, has no opinion whatever on the color. He is looking at the snow. You are unkind, sir, to a lady on her fitting day. I am told I am unkind. It is one of the few things said of me that is true. Lady Cassandra's smile did not slip, because it was painted on too well for that, but her eyes came round to Iris in the glass. You there, the gown pulls at the shoulder. Do you mean to send me before a duke with a pucker in my silk? The gown does not pull, my lady, said Iris, pinning. You are holding your breath, and silk cannot flatter a held breath. Let it out, and the pucker goes with it. I did not ask to be corrected by a shop girl. You asked to be got right, my lady, which is a different service, and the one you are paying for. From the window came a sound the fitting room had not heard in years, and the footman by the door actually jumped, because it was the Duke himself laughing. When the lady had gone to change, he did not go. He crossed to the deal table where Iris kept her patterns and her father's old shears and her ledger, and looked down at the ledger, which lay open. You keep your books like a merchant. I am a merchant's daughter, your Grace. It is the only inheritance that did not arrive with debts attached to it. And these? He did not touch the page. He only read the column where she had entered, that morning, the sum she owed a silk merchant in Spitalfields, and the smaller sum she had, and the unhappy subtraction between them. Mine or my father's, which is the same account by now. She closed the ledger, not sharply, but as one shuts a door on a cold room. You need not concern yourself, your grace. I dress your brides. My arithmetic is my own. They are not my brides. They wish to be. I am aware of what they wish. He looked at her then, full in the face, in the winter light, and the look held a fraction longer than it ought. And Iris felt it land somewhere beneath her breastbone, where she had no business feeling anything at all. It is a rare relief, Miss Holloway, to stand in a room with a person who does not wish it. And he left. And Iris pressed her hand flat on the closed ledger and told herself firmly that dukes were bored, and that a bored duke was the most dangerous weather a working woman could be caught out in, and that she was the one person in that house who could not afford to hope. She was right about the danger and wrong about the boredom, and the viewer knows which. He returned to the fittings after that as a matter of course. He did not speak to the ladies. He spoke to Iris about her father's shop, about Cheapside, about whether a bolt of cloth could be honest and a person not. You told Lady Cassandra her new gown told the truth about her, he said one gray afternoon, when the lady had gone. What did it say? That is unkind of you to ask. Your Grace, I have already confessed to unkindness. Answer it. Iris threaded her needle before she spoke, and did not look up, and let the pause stretch 1 second, 2, 3, because a truth landed harder in silence than in haste. It said she is a very beautiful door, she said, with a very cold house behind it. The silk is the door. I did what I could with the door. And if you were to cut a gown that told the truth about me, I would not dare, Your Grace. You dare a great deal. You dared my grandfather. Try me. Very well. She set a pin. I would cut it plain and very dark, and line it with something warm no one was meant to see, and I would sew the lining in by hand so it could not be taken out, and then I would tell no one it was there. That is the truth about you. I think that you have gone to great trouble to be thought cold, and greater trouble still to keep anyone from finding out you are not. For the space of a held breath neither of them looked away, and the winter light lay between them like a thing that could be crossed and was not. You are a dangerous woman with a needle, Miss Holloway. It is the only weapon a poor woman is permitted, Your Grace. We make the most of it. That was the autumn. Very quietly in the fittings, the entire matter was decided on his side entirely, and on hers not at all, for Iris went on believing, right up to the marble floor of the ballroom, that she was a seamstress, a lonely duke found amusing, and that amusement is not a wage a wise woman spends before it is paid. Which returns us to the ballroom, and the 8 words that stopped the music. I have already chosen, he had said, before the assembled ton. It is her. Now the room found its voice, and its voice was outrage. The dowager came through the crowd like weather, her rings flashing. Ravensmore, you will explain yourself, and you will do it quietly. I would rather do it loudly, Aunt, since the room has gathered. He had not taken his eyes from Iris. I have spent a season being shown women as one is shown horses, and I have found among them exactly one I would trust to tell me the truth in the dark. The truth. She is a tradesman's daughter. She is. It is the most reassuring thing about her. A tradesman's daughter knows the price of things. She is a servant in this house, said Lady Cassandra Pruitt, in the clear carrying tone of a lady who had just watched 80 guineas of silk fail to do its work. She hemmed my gown not 4 hours since. She did. She got it right, which is more than the 80 guineas managed. He swept the glittering room with a look. Not one of you has ever once told me the truth about a single thing, because you have all been too busy calculating what I am worth. She told me, in my own gallery, that being a Ravensmore costs everything, and is always paid by someone who did not choose to spend it. She was correct. I have decided to change who pays. Her name is Miss Iris Holloway, and I intend to marry her, publicly, legally, and without apology. Your Grace, said Iris, low, urgent, for his ear and not the room's, you are ruining me to please yourself. Send me back to my table. I am not pleasing myself. If I meant only to please myself, I would have said this a month ago and spared us both a season. Then you are cruel, for you have made me a spectacle before every woman I dressed. I have made you seen, he said. It is not the same thing, though I grant it feels the same tonight. And to the room, before she could answer, you may none of you speak against her in my house. You may speak against me. I have done the thing. Let it be laid at my door and no other. It will be laid at hers, said the dowager grimly, whatever you wish. That is how the world lays its accounts, nephew, and no duke has ever taught it otherwise. Then I shall be the first to try. Into the roar that followed, one man did not roar. He stood near the great fireplace with a glass of his cousin's wine in his hand and a small, patient, unsurprised smile on his handsome face, and he watched the master of the house destroy himself with the fond attention of a man watching a house burn down that he has already insured. This was Julian Ashe. He was the cousin, the son of the late Duke's younger brother, and until the moment the music forgot itself, he had been heir presumptive to Ravensmoor and everything in it, which is to say, a rich man on paper who owned nothing at all, whose whole fortune consisted of the single fact that his cousin had, for 1 full year, refused to marry. Julian Ashe finished his wine, set the glass down upon the mantel with great care, and thought, with the clarity of a man watching the ground open where he was about to have stood. If the marriage stood, he was nothing, and if the seamstress were not free to be married, there could be no marriage at all. He smiled at Iris across the ruined ballroom and lifted his empty glass to her a half-inch in a toast she did not understand, and went out that same hour to find a man he knew who forged things. Iris was installed that night in a good bedchamber on the family floor, over her own strenuous objection, and lay awake in a bed too soft for her, and did the only arithmetic that ever calmed her, the arithmetic of what she stood to lose. She had a trade. She had a name, small but clean. By breakfast she would have the enmity of every woman in that ballroom and half the men, and a duke's word standing over her like a roof she had not asked for and could not trust to hold. I did not ask for this, she told him the next morning. In the library he permitted no one else to enter, and had that morning permitted her. You have made me the most hated woman in 3 counties before I have agreed to a single thing. Then agree to nothing. He stood at the cold hearth. He had not rung for a fire. I did not claim you to trap you. I claimed you because I have watched a year of women perform love at me across dinner tables, and I would sooner be refused by an honest woman than accepted by a liar. You may be refused then. I am a seamstress. I have a shop to lose and a name to keep, and I cannot keep either as the woman a duke picked up off his ballroom floor like a dropped glove. Refuse me, if you like, but refuse me because you do not want me, Miss Holloway, not because you have decided in advance that a woman who keeps her books to the farthing is forbidden to want anything at all. It was so exactly the thing she had told herself in the soft bed that the floor of her caution tilted. Why me? She said. You may have anyone. Tell me why, plainly, or I will not believe a word of it. And here he came very close to telling her the whole of it, the gallery, the pins, the ledger, the year of listening for one voice that did not want his money, and here, being a man who had learned that a thing said too soon is a thing thrown away? He did not. He crossed the cold room to her instead and lifted his hand, slowly, as if it were a question, and brought it to the air beside her jaw and stopped it there, a hair's breadth from her skin, not touching, so that she felt the warmth of his palm without the fact of it, and the whole library held its breath along with her. "Because you spat out your pins," he said, very low, "before you spoke to me. Because you keep your books like a merchant, and your temper like a queen. Because in a year of this house you are the only living soul who has looked at me and seen a man to argue with instead of a purse to be opened." His hand stayed where it was, warm and near and not touching, for 1 second, 2, 3. "That is my plain answer. I have others. I am keeping them." "Why keep them?" "Because a man who empties his whole hand at once has nothing left to bargain with, and because you would not believe them yet. You would take them for a rich man's whim and go home to your shop, and I should have lost the one honest voice in England to a want of patience. You are very sure of me, your grace, for a man I have known 1 season. I am sure of very little. I am sure of you. You are the single certainty this cold house has produced in 10 years, and I mean to be careful with it." Then he took his hand away, unspent, and stepped back, and the space where his palm had been felt colder than the unlit hearth. "You have not lit your fire, your grace," she told him, when she could. "I did not ring for one. No, you never do. It is the one economy a rich man permits himself, and it tells on the whole house." And she crossed to the cold hearth and knelt and built it herself, small and correct, as a merchant's daughter builds a fire she means to have last. And he watched a woman warm his library who had every reason to leave it cold, and understood that he had chosen well, and said nothing, because he had already said too much, and meant to hoard the rest. So the winter went, for a fortnight. She did not agree to marry him, and she did not go. She reordered his cold house instead, as she reordered a badly cut sleeve, because she could not sit idle in a room and watch it be wrong. She shortened the endless dining table so that 2 people at it need not shout. She learned the names of the servants, all of them, and used them, which no one in that house had done in living memory. "What is your name?" she asked the girl who laid the fires on the first morning. "Nan, Miss Nan Pruer." "And how long have you tended the fires here, Nan Pruer?" "6 winters, miss. No one ever asked before." "Then we shall get on. A house that does not know the name of the girl who keeps it warm does not deserve to be warm, and I mean to teach it better manners." And the girl went away astonished, and told the kitchen, and by nightfall the footmen were standing straighter, and the scullery maid had taken to singing. "The table is short by 6 leaves," he observed at dinner, down its new companionable length. The table was built to keep a family from having to speak to one another. "I judged you had had enough of that." "This is an improvement," he said, which was the highest praise the house had ever heard him give anything, and Iris, setting down the salt, felt the small dangerous warmth of it and thought, "I must stop this. A woman may be given everything at a stroke and lose herself in the taking." And she did not stop it, because for once in her careful life she was not entirely in command of the account. He came to the little morning room she had claimed for her cutting one gray forenoon, and stood where the light fell, and watched her chalk a pattern onto lawn. "You have taken over a room of my house," he said. "You were not using it. It faces east and gets the morning, and a woman who cuts cloth needs the morning. If it offends you, I will move my table. It does not offend me. Very little in this house has been used in a decade. I find I like the sound of a room being used." He was quiet a moment. "Tell me something, Miss Holloway." You dressed all of them the Marcus's daughter, the heiress out of Berlin, the beauty they wrote of in the papers. You had them under your pins for a season. What did you make of them? You are asking me to gossip about my own customers, Your Grace. It is very bad for trade. I am asking your opinion. There is a difference, and it is precisely the one you are paid for. She set down the chalk. Very well. They were none of them fools, whatever the papers said, and one or two were kind. But not one of them ever asked me a single question that was not about herself. In all those weeks, not my name, nor where I trained, nor whether my hands ached at the end of a long fitting. They looked past me the way one looks past a mirror, using it and not seeing it. She took up the chalk again. A woman learns a great deal about a person from the far side of a mirror. Your Grace. I would not have married any one of them to you if you had asked me, and I think, though it is not my place to say it, that you knew it, which is why you kept me by the window and would not send me home. Something went very still in him, as the gravel had gone still under his boots the first time she surprised him. And what he said, "Lo, do you learn about me from the far side of your mirror?" For one heartbeat she came near the truth of him, near enough that a wiser woman would have looked away, and being who she was, she answered it plainly, without knowing what she answered. "That you have been waiting for something," she said, "for a long time, and have grown so used to the waiting that you have forgotten it is meant to end." She looked up and found him closer than she had thought, and neither of them moved, and the morning lay between them like a thing that could be crossed and was not. Then the case clock struck the half hour, and the spell broke, and he inclined his head and went out, and Iris stood over her chalk pattern with her heart going like a hemming stitch, and told herself once more, and with less conviction than before, that she was the one person in that house who could not afford to hope. It was into this fortnight that Julian Ashe returned, all charm and cousinly concern, with a lawyer's clerk in a plain coat 2 paces behind him and a leather folder under his arm. "Cause," he said, "I come on a painful errand, and I would spare you if I could. It touches Miss Holloway's good name. And a good name, once questioned, is best cleared in the open. Gather the county. Let it be done before witnesses, so no whisper can outlive it. You are very fond of witnesses, Julian. Only of the truth, cause, only ever of the truth. You have never in your life been fond of the truth, Julian. You are fond of what the truth can be made to look like in a crowded room. What is it you want? Say it plainly, for once, and I may even respect you for it." "I want what is fair," said Julian Ashe, and the smile did not waver. "I want a great family not made ridiculous by a moment's fancy for a girl who sews. Marry a seamstress, and you make every one of us a joke, cause, and I among us the loudest, for it is my name too. It is your expectations you are defending, not your name. Be honest to that degree at least. Call it what you like. Gather the county. Let them judge whether I defend a name or a fancy, and let them judge her while they are about it. Then you shall have your witnesses. Thursday, and if you are lying, you will do it before all of them." They gathered on the Thursday in the long saloon, the same jeweled crowd, near enough, that had filled the ballroom, drawn back by the promise of a scandal richer than a wedding. The dowager sat in state. Lady Cassandra Pruitt sat near the front, in a gown Iris had made, with the settled expression of someone who had bought a ticket to a hanging. And Iris stood where she had stood on the first night, at the edge in her dove gray, because she would not borrow a grander gown to be accused in. Julian Ashe rose, opened his leather folder, and was courtesy itself. "I come to you not as an accuser," he began, but as a man who has stumbled on a grief and cannot in conscience let a good family walk into it blind. My cousin means to marry this woman. Before he does, the county should know what I have learned, that Miss Iris Holloway is not free to marry anyone. He drew out a document, aged and folded, and held it up so the seal caught the light. This is a contract of betrothal, signed and witnessed, binding Miss Holloway in the spring of last year to one Ambrose Cheswick, a merchant of Kent. A contract she never dissolved and never disclosed, and left in force when she came into this house and let a duke offer for her. Mr. Cheswick, poor man, died of a fever in the autumn. There is no husband to complain. There is only this, a solemn engagement, entered into for money, concealed, and conveniently widowed by a grave. He laid the paper on the little table in the center of the room, where it could be seen and not touched. I put it to you plainly, cousin. You have offered your name to a woman who sold her word to a shopkeeper and hid the sale. She is not your bride. She is a fraud, and she should be put out of this house before she is put into your family. The saloon breathed out all at once in a long hiss of silk and satisfaction, and Lady Cassandra let one small triumphant sound escape her, quickly stifled. Here was what Iris stood to lose, and the cousin had built it well, and stated it in words no one could misunderstand. If the contract held, she was a liar who had trapped a duke. She would be cast out without a character. Her father's clean small name would become a byword. No house in England would take work from a seamstress who had schemed for a coronet, and her intended would be the great cold fool who had crossed a ballroom for a swindler, and would marry Lady Cassandra by spring to bury the shame, and Julian Ash would be heir again, and everything would be exactly, profitably, as it had been. All of it turned on a single sheet of paper, in a room full of people who wished to believe it. He had gone very white and very still, the man who had claimed her. He looked at Iris across the saloon, and for one terrible instant she saw the question in the storm gray eyes, not whether it was true, but whether she had done it, which is a colder question, and she understood that even he was not proof against a document, and that she had exactly as long as it took a room to make up its mind to save herself. She did not weep. She did not look at him again, because looking at him would cost her the steadiness she needed, and she needed all of it. She folded her own hands, the thumb pressed flat so the room would not see what it cost her, and she stepped forward off the wall into the center of the saloon, toward the little table. "May I see it?" "You may look," said Julian Ash. "It is your own signature. I should think you would know it." "I should think I would." And she looked. She looked a long time, longer than the room found comfortable, with the narrow attention of one who had spent a lifetime reading the small, honest print at the bottom of accounts. And while she looked, she spoke not to the cousin, but to the room, in the level teaching voice the servants had learned to linger in the passage for. "It is well done," she said. "The paper is aged. The hand is close to mine, closer than a stranger could manage, so it was traced, and traced from something real. A letter of mine, I should think, that went astray. The seal is Mr. Cheswick's. I do not doubt the man existed, nor that he is dead, for a dead man cannot be asked. It is, in short, exactly the sort of thing a clever person makes when he needs a woman to be already promised." She looked up. But a forger, however clever, can only forge what he knows. And there is one thing here he could not have known, because it is in no letter of mine, and it is the thing that hangs him. "Enlighten us," said Julian Ash, still smiling, though the smile had begun to cost him something. "The contract is dated the 9th of April last year. Signed, it says, at Maidstone, in Kent, in my own hand, before witnesses. She set it down. On that day I was not in Kent. I was in London, in a rented workroom off Wardour Street, cutting 40 yards of court muslin for a mercer named Halcombe, and I can prove it 3 times over, which is twice more than an honest woman should ever need. She turned to the servant she had asked to wait in the passage for Iris Holloway, who kept her books to the farthing, had spent the 2 nights since the cousin gave his gentle notice not weeping but sending for her papers, on the plain merchant's instinct that a woman under attack should assemble her ledgers before the auditors arrive. My workbook. It was laid on the table beside the forgery, a plain stitched thing, water-stained, entirely unglamorous, kept in my own hand day by day as my father taught me. Turn to April. The 9th, you will find 40 yards of court muslin cut for Halcombe of Bishopsgate, the yardage entered, the price entered, the cost of the thread entered. I entered the thread, gentlemen. A forger inventing my whereabouts would never think to enter the thread. And in the margin, the note that it rained, and that the damp made the muslin cling, and that I lost an hour to it. A woman signing a betrothal in Maidstone does not, that same afternoon, complain in her workbook of the London rain. A sound went through the room, and it was not the sound Julian Ash wanted. A private book, he said, quickly, proves nothing but its own writing. She could have penned it last night. She could. So do not take my word, nor my book. Take the guilds. She laid down a second paper, and it bore a stamp and a hand that was not hers. A receipt from the worshipful company that governs my trade for my quarter's dues, paid in person at their hall in the city of London on the 8th of April, the day before the contract says I was in Kent, receipted in the clerk's hand, and entered in the company's own book, which stands in their hall this hour for any gentleman to send and see. A woman cannot pay her dues in London on the 8th and sign a contract in Maidstone at dawn on the 9th. The roads do not run so fast. Your forger, sir, knew the shape of my letters. He did not know the shape of my life. And then she did the thing that turned a defense into a rout, because she had realized whose hand the forgery was, for she had spent a fortnight in that house and had marked, in the cousin's own correspondence left carelessly about, the particular way he crossed a lowercase letter. Being a merchant's daughter, she did not merely defend her own account. She opened his. There is one more thing, and then I am done, and the county may do as it pleases with me. A man who traces a hand must practice it. He ruins a dozen sheets before he ruins yours. She looked, for the first time, directly at the cousin. You are heir presumptive to Ravensmore, sir, or you were, until a fortnight ago, when your cousin crossed a ballroom. The day he marries, you inherit nothing. That is a motive so plain a child could read it, and I am no child. I ask the gentleman present one small favor. Send to Maidstone. Ask the town whether Ambrose Cheswick, merchant, was ever betrothed to any London seamstress, or whether he died a bachelor, of a fever, leaving an estate with no widow and a great many private papers a grieving clerk might sell cheap. Ask who bought the late man's letters this autumn. I think you will find the buyer's name, and I think it will not be mine. The saloon was utterly silent now. Julian Ash had stopped smiling. He made his last stand where such men always make it, on the high ground of station. This is a shopwoman, he said, and his voice had gone thin, waving a workbook and a tradesman's receipt and slandering a gentleman of this family before his own people. I have laid before you a contract, sealed and witnessed. She has laid before you a ledger of muslin and a scrap from a guild of tailors. Which of us, gentlemen, do you choose to believe a Ravensmore by blood, or a seamstress with a grievance and a rich man to gain? That, said a quiet voice at her shoulder, is the one question you should never have asked. He had crossed the room while his cousin spoke the whole length of it again, as he had crossed the ballroom so that he came to stand beside Iris at the little table, between her and the room. He picked up the forged contract and held it to the window light, and the county watched a duke's face change. I keep your correspondence of the last 12 months in a drawer of the library you were always so keen to be let into, he said, laying the paper down flat. Every letter you have written me since Michaelmas. I have looked this last minute at how you cross your L's and loop your Y's. And I have looked at how this contract crosses its L's and loops its Y's. They are the same coward's hand. You did not buy a dead man's papers, Julian. You wrote this yourself, and traced my future wife's signature off a letter you stole from under my roof, and you gambled that a room full of people who envy her would swallow it because she sews for her bread. Ravensmore cause. You should never have signed your forgery in the same hand you begged me for money with. He did not raise his voice through any of it, and that was the terrible part, and the room felt 30 years of certainty go out of Julian Ash's face like water out of a cracked jug. You will leave my house within the hour. Be grateful I was taught that revenge is only the cold returning the cold, or I should send this paper and your letters together to a magistrate and let the law measure your neck for a rope. There is a modest annuity settled on you from birth. Keep it, since it is not mine to take, and let it remind you every quarter day of the fortune you tried to forge your way back into. Go to some duller county where your name means nothing and practice your penmanship on something honest. You are ruined, cousin by the only clean account ever taken of you, kept by a seamstress, in a workbook, in the rain. Julian Ash looked once round the saloon for a single face that would meet his, and found none. For a room that has been made a fool of is never grateful to the man who made it one in public. He gathered his leather folder and his silent clerk, and went out, and the door that closed behind him was the coldest sound the county had heard all winter. Then the master of Ravensmore turned from that door, before the whole assembled ton, and looked at the woman standing at the little table with her plain workbook and her gilt receipt and her thumbs no longer pressed flat, and did the thing he had been hoarding since September. You asked me once, ain't you all asked why I refused every woman this house set before me for a year? He spoke so that all of them heard, and none could pretend they had not. I let you think it coldness. It was not. It was that I had already chosen. In a gallery. The week this woman spat out her pins to be civil to me, and I did not know how to say so to a woman who kept her books so carefully she would never let herself believe a duke could mean it. So I said nothing. I let a year go by. I let my aunt parade heiresses at me because it kept the house from guessing where I truly looked. He turned to Iris. Every one of them I refused. I refused because of you. I did not choose you tonight. I chose you in the autumn, in the dark, and told no one, and it nearly cost you your good name. And for that I am sorrier than I know how to say. He took her hand, then took it, this time no near touch withheld, and closed his own over her ink-stained fingers before the entire ton as though they were the finest thing in the house. I chose you, Iris. The room made its noise. Iris did not hear much of it. She was doing a sum, the last and largest of her careful life, and for the first time it was coming out in her favor, and she found that she would not answer as a rescued woman answers, because she had not been rescued. She had saved herself, with a ledger and the rain, and a woman who saves herself may choose freely, which is the only manner in which she had ever been willing to choose anything. "I heard you the first time, Your Grace," she answered, and her voice was not perfectly level, and the room was quiet enough now that everyone heard it fail, and no one for once thought less of her for it. "In the ballroom." I did not answer, because I do not sign an account I have not audited. I have audited it now. She glanced down at their joined hands, then up at the storm-gray eyes. "I chose you in the library, when you rang for no fire, and I built you one, and you let me and did not thank me, and I understood you did not wish to be warmed for show. I merely saw no profit in publishing the entry before its date. And has the date come?" "The date has come. Yes, I will have you not because you crossed a ballroom for me, but because you crossed a room again just now to stand between me and a lie before you knew whether the lie was true. A man who will do that is worth the risk in any book I keep." "Yes," she said, "with my whole heart." And she put her other hand into his, both of them, ink and all, before the county that had come to see her hanged, and the Duke of Ravensmore, who had not kissed a woman in the memory of anyone living under that roof, bent his head and kissed her, once in front of all of them, gently and without apology, as a man kisses the one honest thing he has found in a cold house. And the ton, which had come for a scandal, got a wedding instead, and had the grace, most of it, to applaud. Of the rest of them there is little to add, and the little is instructive. Lady Cassandra Pruitt, who had believed to the last that beauty was a fortune that could not be spent, married within the year a wealthy merchant twice her age, who valued her precisely as an ornament and warmed her exactly as much as it pleased him. She got her cold house with its beautiful door at last, and never understood why the fires in her own rooms always seemed to sink the moment her back was turned, and she never again smiled in company without first checking who was watching. The dowager, who had run a whole season to find her nephew a duchess and been handed a seamstress, complained of it bitterly for a fortnight, then discovered that the seamstress had shortened the dining table and learned the servants' names, and could not, on inspection, be done without, and became the new duchess's fiercest defender, and told the story ever after as though the match had been entirely her own idea. And Julian Ash lived out his quarter days in a duller county on his modest annuity, received everywhere with civility and nowhere with warmth, which was the whole of the justice the world ever saw, and which Iris, doing the last sum in the wage book of her soul, judged exact. They were wed at the parish church below the great house at the very end of the winter, quietly, with the servants filling the back pews unasked, and the scullery maid singing the responses louder than the vicar liked. Iris wore gray her own color, chosen freely though it was the finest gray the county had ever seen, cut by a hand that knew better than any in England how to tell the truth about a woman in cloth. The story does not end at the altar, and it should not, for the altar is only where two people agree to begin the account. It ends a year and a little more on a winter evening, in a room that had once been the coldest the seamstress ever worked in and was now the warmest in the county. The great cold house was cold no longer. The fires were lit in every wing, morning and night, not because a family's consequence demanded it, but because the master had ruled that no soul under his roof should ever again learn what it was to freeze in a house that could have warmed them. And at its heart, where a bleak morning room had been, was Iris's workroom, good light, honest cloth, her father's old shears on the sill, because a woman does not stop being what she is merely because she has married a duke, and this one had no intention of trying. There was a child by then, a dark and watchful little thing with its mother's quick hands and its father's storm-gray eyes, who liked best of all to sit among the pins and be told sternly not to eat them. On that winter evening, the master came in out of the cold gallery. He walked it still, but for a different reason now, and found his wife and his child at the deal table, the child holding a length of thread taut, while its mother cut. "You are letting the babe near the shears." "I am teaching the babe the shears," said Iris, not looking up. "There is a difference, Your Grace, and it is the whole of an education." She cut, set the shears down, and the child crowed. "My father taught me on his own good scissors when I was smaller than this one. He said a girl who respects a sharp thing will never be cut by a dull life. I did not understand him then. And now?" She looked up at the man who had crossed a ballroom and a saloon and a whole cold house to stand where the truth was, and she smiled, and it reached her eyes. "Now I keep the sharpest things in the house, and none of them has cut me yet." He came to her. He was always coming to her. She had learned to count on it, and stood behind her chair with his hand at the small of her back, present and warm, and this time entirely touching, and looked down at the work on the table, which was a small gray dress for a growing child, cut plain and true. "It is an improvement," he said, which she knew by now to be the highest praise he had, and she laughed, because she had taught the whole house to hear the love in the flatness of it. And that is the end of the account, and it comes out even at last, which is a thing accounts almost never do. A woman who had measured her whole life in subtractions, and been overlooked in every room she stood in, kept her books so honestly that when a clever man tried to write her out of her own life, she wrote him out of his instead, with a workbook, a guild receipt, and the London rain, and was chosen, out loud, twice, by the one man in England who wanted not her beauty nor her silence, but her plain, unpurchasable truth. She had come to a cold house to dress other women for a duke's choosing, and she had, without once meaning to, been the choice all along. And if there is a lesson in it, Iris had known it long before the county learned it, and said it best herself over the shears. On that warm winter evening, the world will always try to tell a working woman what she is worth, and set the figure low, and expect her to sign it without reading but a woman who keeps her own accounts. To the farthing, and in her own hand, is the one soul alive who can never quite be cheated, because she alone knows the true sum, and she alone gets to name it. Thank you for sitting by the fire with us to the very end of the story of the seamstress who dressed every bride the Duke refused, and turned out, in the end, to be the one he had chosen all along. If it warmed you even a little on a cold evening, we should love to know it. Tell us in the comments which city you are watching from tonight, and what this story made you feel. And tell us which moment stayed with you. Was it the moment he crossed the ballroom and stopped the music? Or was it the moment she opened her workbook and refused to weep? If you would like to sit beside more stories like this one, do subscribe to the channel so you will not miss the tales still to come. Until then, keep your own accounts honestly, and be well.